Hey, what is going on, everybody? I'm excited to be back, and I heard some of the comments based on the Stellum Bourbon review video that you all did want to see the Stellum Rye. So today we are checking out the Stellum Rye. Again, this is from the folks at Barrel Craft Spirits, and we are looking at the 116.24 proof rye whiskey. So this pour is going to be their standard offering. It says on the back that it's distilled in Indiana, Kentucky, and Tennessee as well. But we can assume that for the most part, the majority of this profile is going to be that 95.5 mash bill. So we've already got this poured out. You all can see a little bit of that. It looks a little light in color for a cask strength whiskey. That's going to be anywhere between, I believe, 4 and 10 years old. But what we're going to do is we're going to dive right into it. And I've got a couple of things, too, I want to compare it to. So let's go ahead and dive in. And the nose, I don't remember exactly what these things were called, but you might remember those little mint candies. They're in really light, pale colors like pink and white and green. And you serve them up in a dish. I thought I remember them like at my grandparents' house. That's kind of what I noticed on the nose. It's got some of that mint candy note. It moves into a little bit of peach, almost like what we noticed in the bourbon. Some candied orange as well. Almond paste, or like something that's slightly cherry note. Like Luxardo cherry a little bit. Some lemon zest. Man, there's a lot in here. Some vanilla, a little bit of like dry leather. It's creamy, but it does carry a lot of spice to it. And honestly, kind of similar to the bourbon, if you let it sit in your glass a little bit longer, you will notice, look at these legs, if this camera will catch that. You'll notice a little bit more of the caramel come out if you let it sit in the glass a little bit longer, which I highly recommend. But either way, I can tell, this is MGP style. This is that Indiana style, a little bit more of the rye spice bite. So on the nose, I can already kind of assume that if you're a rye drinker, this is for you. If you like the Kentucky style ryes, this is going to be your introduction to that style of rye. Let's go ahead and palate. A big burst of the orange citrus there, with a little bit of honey sweetness, kind of sweetening the spice. But it does immediately go from that citrus into some of your rye spices, your baking spices, your cinnamon, your clove, your black pepper. It's got a drier linger to it on the palate. Herbal trailing with those baking spices. Man, it kind of resurges. It comes back again to that pop of orange. It doesn't really coat in a rich, like an overly rich and sweet way, like maybe the Pikesville rye might, if you remember that from the rye video that I recently did. But it's also not as kind of subtly youth forward as the Nashville Barrel Company's small batch would be. So I'm curious to put this up against a more cask strength MGP profile. Now, from my first tasting experience with this, I did lean a little bit more for the bourbon than I did to the rye. And even tasting it prior to this video, I almost lean that way. But man, this and kind of like the bourbon too, the more you accustom your palate to it, the more you notice about it. So I can't help but note that as you sip this, it introduces these deeper rye bread notes to it. You get espresso come out, a little bit of oak, a little bit of milk chocolate, some apple characteristic to it as well. Other pie spices. It's got a long linger, slightly medicinal cherry with a little bit of undertone of like that lemon oil. But it kind of smooths out into like a little almond paste note. It reminds me of like an almond croissant when I think about that. And it's got the almond paste in the center. So it's still sweet, kind of cherry-like, almond creamy, but it is a little bit more on the spice side than it is the sweet side. So let's set this aside for 1 second. And we want to put something up that is similar price point to this. So we're going to go into a new Riff Single Barrel. This is 113.7. Okay, so this is a 4-year should be product. little bit more colorful, not a lot, a little bit more colorful on the palate. The nose is a little bit more baked apple, cinnamon notes. The palate's initially a bit more rush of wood spice, and then kind of a creamy apple butter-like finish to it. So it's got both a little bit more two-dimensional spice to it, but maybe a little bit more richness to the profile. So what you make up for in a similar style rye with a little bit more spice-driven nature, a little bit more richness to the body, but you're lacking in a little bit of the complexity that I feel like you can pull out of the Stellum Rye. Now, I have to let it be said right now, this single barrel New Riff Rye, they're going to vary from barrel to barrel. So those profiles could be all over the place. That's just indicative of the barrel that I personally have. Now, let's go ahead and compare to a Nashville Barrel Company 7-year single barrel. Again, it's another single barrel, so these are going to vary from price to price, but at least it gives us another cask strength. This is 113.84. Another cask strength MGP product. This is something that is perhaps not quite double the price, but it's going to be a lot more, maybe on the $90 price point. Man, so already the nose, though, does draw you in a little bit more. It is sultry on the nose in this particular one. I'm not going to go too verbose on the nose, but it is sultry and inviting, decadent, rich. It's just pulling me in. Let's go ahead and taste. It's everything that the Stellum has, but ramped up in flavor. Cakey, dense, sweet, chewy, lots more caramel, lots more vanilla. Still all those beautiful spices and citrus that it has, but just so much more decadent, so much more articulate than we note in the Stellum. In fact, I'll just go ahead and go back to the Stellum. A little bit lighter on the nose, a little bit easier. Does seem to draw out a little bit more melon notes, and peachy notes. What I've noticed in the small batch of the Nashville Barrel Company. So that's refreshing. That's enjoyable. It's got a little bit more juiciness to it, and seems to add a little bit more frosted sweetness to the finish. Quickly going back to the Nashville Barrel Company. Spice is turned up, but incredibly elegant, well placed. Very desserty as well. Beautiful balance of spice and sweetness. Hard to compare the two. I definitely think you get your money's worth going up. But I digress. That's not what this is about. So let's go to one last product, and that is the Starlight. It's a double oaked rye whiskey. However, this is the Entry Proof podcast pick that we have done. It is 5 years old, 112.4. So it's going to be a little different. It is a double oaked rye whiskey, but Starlight's doing some really cool things also in Indiana, so I wanted to add it in. Let's taste that. The nose definitely gives some slightly inviting notes that do lean towards, some spiced apple as well, but then some cake batter sweetness. Very different. Super buttery. Super sweet, lots of light cinnamon, but otherwise juicy apple, really creamy, graham crackery sweetness, honey. It's the most unique of all of these. So not exactly fair to put that in, but again, I wanted to compare this Stellum to something else that's similarly priced. And I think what you're getting in the Stellum, going back to the Stellum, as much as I didn't think so, really juicy, really well put together rye blend. And again, like the bourbon here in Louisville, at least at our Costco, this is $43.99. So this is priced even slightly under the Pikesville rye. What a value that you're getting out of this rye. And then that puts you a lot lower price than most of these products that we are tasting. And as much as I thought against it, you're really getting something that has a lot of flavor to it. I would say, as much as I enjoy sipping on the bourbon, I think while it's summertime, it gives you a lot of easygoing sweetness and flavor to sip on that as it opens gives you more chewiness and brown sugar and sweetness. Switching over to the rye profile, if you are into ryes, you're gonna like this bottle a whole lot. I would think that this is another bottle that might be served more towards the fall or the winter, just because that's when I personally tend to lean towards ryes more. But compared to the new Riff Single Barrel, at least the one that I have, a lot more dimension in terms of flavors with the Stellum, at the expense of a little less creamy, chewy sweetness. Definitely doesn't have the amped up flavors like the Nashville Barrel Company does, but again, we're talking about half the price here. And then when you go into the Starlight, completely different animal. This is a little bit longer of a video than I normally do. You let me know if you like something like that. When I am going to do some comparisons, I heard some comments of folks saying that they wanted me to do more blinds. Those things are going to have me comparing some products. It's going to have a little bit longer formed video. On the channel, I did want to try and make very quick, very short reviews for you all. So this breaks the mold a little bit. It's both a comparison to other products, but it's also a review. So let me know if you don't mind something that comes in around the 13, 14 minute mark. If you don't like it, you don't want to stick around to the end, you might not be able to leave a comment because you didn't see this. But I want to know if you guys like that sort of content. Definitely recommend on the Stellum Rye. Both of these products from Stellum have been highly enjoyable. If you want to hear more content, feel free to subscribe to the Entry Proof Podcast. That's a podcast that I do with Drew P. Whiskey. He is also here on YouTube. You can follow us at entryproofpodcast.com or on your streaming services that you like. And usually we are live on his channel Thursday nights at 9 Eastern Standard Time, 8 Central Standard Time. If you like the content that we're putting out, or if you like the content here on this video, feel free to support us on Patreon. We're patreon.com/entryproofpodcast. Let me know if there's other things you want to hear me talk about. If there's samples you want me to try, feel free to shoot me a message and let me know so I can get those in and try them here on the channel. I've got some fun things that I have lined up for future episodes. I'd really like to review the new Riff, new 6-year malted rye, as well as do a couple of blinds for you all. Thanks, as always, for watching the channel, guys. Let me know if you've tried the Stellum Rye and what you all think. Until next time, we'll see you later.